It's time to post a new video to show you the latest on this project of building a 6502 based microcomputer. So what I've been working on lately is adding some mass storage to the computer. Rather than just uploading files from my laptop, I also want to be able to store things on the computer itself. And the 1970s and 1980s, computers of this sort used to store data on cassette tapes or perhaps on floppy disks if you were very lucky. Those are hard technologies to get hold of these days, so instead I've been interfacing it to little SD cards like this. Now, SD cards are a much more recent technology, and in fact the way that I control them, I'm not getting access to the full capacity or the full speed of them, but it's more than enough for anything I need on here. So I've got an SD card in this little breakout board, and that's wired into the 6522 interface adapter over there. And I've put code into my fourth system that will bit bang the protocol, just like directly do the protocol in software, so that I can read and write data from the SD card. So if we have a look at the fourth system, I've already got it loaded up here. So let's just start it. And if I look at the defined words, you'll see up in the first part of that, there's a whole lot of junk, all sorts of stuff that I've been using to do debugging and just to get things going. Word there, like that command 17 and command 58, that's the parts of the SPI protocol that the SD card speaks, and I'll get rid of those before too long, but I want to show you the more interesting parts. So let's start off by mounting the card that we have. Just type mount, and it says initialized Mite 3, so Mite is the name of the computer, and Mite 3, that's the disk label for the SD card that I've got installed. And in fact, if we look over here at the oscilloscope, you can see the basic signaling going back and forth from the processor to the SD card. So the yellow trace at the bottom is the clock signal. The blue trace is the data that's going from the computer to the SD card, and the purple trace is the data that's coming back. So that's the initialization process there. I've been using the oscilloscope for debugging things, but now that things are going, I don't really need that anymore. So now we've got the card mounted, I can type dir, and it will show me what files there are on the card. So there's just a couple on here. Most of them are text files that have been taken, they're just little Wikipedia, things extracted from Wikipedia documents just for test purposes. And then, so we can take a look at one of those. If I type show w65.txt, and there's a file from the Wikipedia page for the 6502. And I'm not sure if you can see, but there's a little LED down here on the SD card that flashes when it's accessing the file, accessing the data, so that you can perhaps see when something is happening there. But more interestingly, there are those two files with the extension fs, that's for a fourth source. So in fact, if we look at the words again, it says the most recently defined word is include, and that's a word that will read a file from the SD card and then process it in fourth, so that we can load code into it. And so in fact, if I was to include the file core.fs, okay, so it's loaded that, and sure enough, if we look at words, there's all sorts of new words defined now: DDRA, DDRB, port A. That's just some basic stuff that's been loaded in, but you can tell by the fact that there's now new words that are more recently defined than include, that it's managed to process something from the card. So for instance, the page word just clears the screen. So meantime, let's include the other fs, which is civ.fs, which is the prime numbers program that I think I've run here before. I'll just have it calculate some prime numbers. So this is a program that I was using before, both to test the computer as a whole and to test the fourth implementation in particular. And now I guess I'm also using it to test out that my SD card is working. So it's been pretty generically useful. So that's code that we've now loaded in from the SD card and can run under Forth. So right now, it's running the FAT16 file system, which is a pretty old file system, but it means I can copy files back and forth on those SD cards between my laptop and the computer. But it can't write any files just yet. So I'd really like to be able to write files so that I can be doing development on the machine directly and saving and loading files onto the SD cards. That's probably the next thing to be done, and maybe once I get that done, I'll post another video.